Thank you very much for joining us, and very sorry for this technical issue. We'll try to solve it during the presentation, and hopefully I will see you all at the end of the webinar. Still, today we're going to have our third webinar with Rozaliya Ziryanova. And let me tell you a couple of words about our presenter. So who is Rozaliya Ziryanova? Who is Rozaliya? Rozaliya is a lecturer in the Westminster International University in Tashkent. She holds first-class honors in the English language and literature from Samarkand State University, and TESOL certificates from SIT Graduate Institute. She is one of the authors of the first Fly High series of textbooks for the 5th and 9th grades. Actually, the British Council has been cooperating with Rozaliya for a long time, and we're really very proud of this cooperation, and hopefully we'll continue our cooperation with Rozaliya in future. So within our cooperation, we've known Rozaliya is a great materials writer, test designer, teacher trainer, because we've been working with her within a number of projects, like development of language testing handbook in 2006, like writing and developing INSET program through ED, as well as teacher training program CTT in 2008. She's been also very, very valuable for us as a material designer within English for Tourism project, and one of the members of our team within English for teachers, as well as English for academics program. I would also like to tell you that Rozaliya Ziryanova is also a drama club supervisor, and I should say that this club is very popular, not only among the students of the Westminster International University in Tashkent, but other young people interested in drama. Here I'd like to stop speaking and give the floor to Rozaliya so that she could tell us more about the topic of today's webinar, which is do you like reading books in English? So Rozaliya, if you're ready, I guess you can start. We are eager to listen to you.
Thank you very much. I will try. It's just my luck that things don't work very well from the start. Okay. Can you see anything?
It's coming.
Yes. No,
we can see it, Rosa.
Where do I say you share that you just see the slides, not the screen? No?
No? We saw the slides. Yeah, we can see the slides.
But you see, can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
The first slide. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, once again, good afternoon, everybody who came to this seminar, webinar, joined this webinar. The topic, as announced by the British Council, is do you like reading books in English? As any yes/no question, it can be answered very simply. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Sometimes, depends on the book. Because these answers do not explain very clearly the importance that reading plays in our life, I decided to come up with a more extended title, which you can see here, which is How Reading Fiction Can Help Us Develop Personally and Professionally. When I say us, I mean us not only as teachers of English, but also, and that's probably more important, as users of English. Today's webinar will consist of two parts. First, we will talk about two distinctive styles of reading and also different benefits that reading fiction can bring us. I will share with you some information about several authors and their books that I like very much. And here I must apologize. This my personal choice and my personal taste. But I really hope that you will get interested and read these books too, and in that way share my passion for reading modern works of fiction. At the end, I'll take the liberty and suggest some recommendations to all those who like reading fiction in English and maybe not so much. Okay, let's continue. By the way, can you hear me well? Reading. Intensive and extensive. Two styles, two manners of reading. The goal of reading intensively is to absorb or understand as much meaning from a text as possible. This is what I did when I was a student, with the help of my teachers, of course, in the lessons of analytical reading when I was a university student. We looked up every word, every collocation that we didn't know or didn't understand, paid attention to grammatical structures, answered comprehension questions, and so on. And sometimes we spent days and days working on the same text, so that at the end it became a little bit boring. But I remember the words of my teacher, who said that it is important to be able to analyze texts that we read so that we develop a taste for good literature. This is how we work with our students. This is what we as language teachers do when we teach our students. Usually texts that we deal with, that are included in textbooks, well, good textbooks, of course, are relatively short. And hopefully they are interesting, because if they are not interesting, the readers, our students, will not stay focused. And this is the main thing for intensive reading. Texts shouldn't be very long and they should be really engaging, interesting. Read extensively means to read much longer texts and not pay a lot of attention to unknown words. While reading extensively, we usually look up words only when it's absolutely necessary to understand a sentence or a paragraph. Another name for extensive reading is reading for pleasure or reading for fun. And reading for fun can be done anywhere. You can read on a bus, which I very often do. You can read at home, on your sofa. If you go for a walk and take a book with you, you can find a bench in the park and sit down and read there. This is reading for pleasure or extensive reading. Now let's see what benefits reading fiction has. Goodness, can't move. Okay, yes. No. Reading fiction and its benefits. Reading fiction improves our ability to empathize. That is, to experience empathy. Empathy is an ability to put yourself in the shoes of others. Reading fiction allows us to feel emotions of other people and understand the motives of their behavior, their thoughts. And this is really important for real life. In real life, when we develop relationships, we need to be able to empathize with other people. Reading fiction also improves our social skills. Here I would like to give an example. Let's imagine that you need to be engaged in a conversation. For a conversation to really take place, it is necessary to give full attention to what your interlocutor, the person you are talking with, is saying. It is necessary to concentrate. And this is exactly what books teach us. They teach us to develop our concentration, our patience. These are social skills. Plus, books gives us topics for discussion. The next thing that reading fiction improves is our ability to adapt and change. to adapt to real life situations, especially those that are very stressful. Some research shows that reading is the most effective way to overcome stress. You may believe it or not, but research conducted at the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom shows that reading is more effective than other methods of dealing with stress, such methods as listening to music or going for a walk or even having a cup of tea. Well, reading fiction helps us to adapt change because change is what is happening all the time around us. And probably, well, let's take an example of science fiction. Things that great writers of science fiction like Ray Bradbury, for example, wrote about now have become reality. We are now living in a changed world as compared to what what we experienced when I was a student. And finally, which I find really important for us as professionals, is the fact that reading fiction improves our vocabulary. It's really a great way to enrich our vocabulary. As a user of the language, as the user of English, I can say without false modesty, that I possess a huge, great passive vocabulary, which helps me when I read. And this happened thanks to reading. So see how reading improved my vocabulary, and now my large passive vocabulary makes my reading really enjoyable. Okay, let's focus a bit more on how reading fiction helps us to focus on ideas and vocabulary. And here I'd like to speak about my own experience, what I do. First of all, I read hard copies more often. I very rarely read from the screen of my computer or from some other gadget. The fact that reading hard copies is less tiresome for eyes is something that everybody recognizes, everybody agrees with. For some people, for example, for me, tactile senses are also important. There is nothing better than taking a new book and smelling the pages. It's really enjoyable. That's why I prefer reading hard copies, and I don't know about you, but maybe some people will agree with me that reading hard copies is much better than reading from a screen. When I read, I highlight phrases and things I don't understand, and sometimes I do not go immediately to the dictionary. I don't consult the dictionary immediately, but I leave these things or phrases for further consideration. When I can look things up in a dictionary or talk to native speakers who can explain things to me which I don't understand. Sometimes when I read, I notice that different authors prefer using the same words in their books. And I can give an example. Once I read several books by an English author, P.D. James. And in one of the books, I met the word spurious. I learned at that moment that it was the word meaning the adjective which means false, not sincere, not authentic, false. And when I read the second book, I again saw the same word. And in another book by the same author, the same book also caught my eye. So I understood that this is something that P.D. James prefers. She prefers to use the word spurious rather than false. And I learned this word, I remembered it because I highlighted it, and then it helped me when I turned to her other books. Sometimes I do focused reading. I would like to explain what I mean by that. I decide that, okay, in this chapter, I will be looking at the way prepositions are used. And if I find something unusual, interesting, something which is not that I usually meet, that I usually see, I will try to remember it. As you probably know and will agree with me, prepositions are the second hardest thing in English after articles. Some other time I would tell myself that now let's look at the adjectives that the author uses to describe her characters, their manner of speaking, their behavior. And I would do this with the purpose of focusing on this kind of vocabulary, adjectives. But most often I do relaxed reading when I ignore things that I don't understand, because usually the context can help. And if I really want to learn something, to learn some new vocabulary, I can do it later on after highlighting this phrase. Relaxed reading is very enjoyable, and I spend quite a lot of time doing this. Well, that's the end of the first part of my talk, and now I would like to share with you some information about three modern writers. The first one is John Grisham. John Grisham is a best-selling American author known for his legal thrillers. He studied law at Mississippi State University and worked as a lawyer for about 10 years, but then devoted himself entirely to writing novels. You can see on the screen how many books he has written and what kind of books. Many of his books were then adapted into TV series and films. I'll talk about his two books. The first is The Client. It's the first novel by John Grisham that I read. The Reckoning is the last one which I read. I read it last summer. Okay, The Client first. This book is about an 11-year-old boy called Mark who lives with his mother and younger brother. Mark understands that his mom's life is not easy because she's a single mother. Their father has left them, and now he feels responsible for his younger brother, Ricky, and tries to spend as much time with him as possible, in that way freeing his mom. Once the boys were spending some time in the woods, when they witnessed how a man was trying to kill himself. The man is an ex-mafia lawyer. The events turn out so that before he shoots himself, he tells Mark a horrible secret. I'll tell you which secret he told. You will learn about when you read the book. Mark doesn't know what to do, but he understands that mafia can track him down, can find him. That's why he needs someone to be on his side. After some thoughts, he decides to hire a lawyer. And he meets a woman, a lawyer, who agrees to help him for a nominal fee of $1, because this is all the money that Mark has. The book is about the relationship, the friendship that develops between this 11-year-old boy, the client of a good lawyer who decided to defend his rights. The book is full of descriptions of what the FBI of the United States did in order to learn the secret. There are also pages about what mafia undertook in order to find out the same secret which only Mark and now his lawyer know. Now about the second book, The Reckoning. The central character of this book is Pete Banning, a Second World War hero. The book has two parts. In part one, we learn about Pete's family. He has a wife, 2 children who are college students, and a sister. One morning, Pete wakes up and decides that this day is the day when he has to kill. He goes and shoots the pastor of the local church and does not try to hide it. But he doesn't explain why he has done that, why he has shot the man who seems to be absolutely innocent. Besides, he is highly respected by all the people who live in this small town. Part 2 of this book is a flashback. It tells about the earlier, about the younger years of the same character, of Pete. The events when he joined the military service. Pete served in the Philippines, where the US forces surrendered to the Japanese in 1942. Pete becomes a prisoner of war, and after a terrible time in a war camp, where there were brutal, absolutely brutal conditions, he's being transferred to a slave labor camp in Japan. But he's being transferred by ship, but the ship is torpedoed and he manages to escape and returns to his motherland, to his native city. It seems that these two parts are not connected. They tell about absolutely different events. And you have to read the book to understand all the connections, all the implications. To be honest, it's the first time, I usually don't like war stories. And it is the first time that I was absorbed reading about the experiences, horrible experiences, all the brutalities that the main character experienced during the war. And what I can say now, my attitude to certain events in the history of the Second World War changed. I now believe that the Japanese were even crueler than fascists. Well, so much for John Grisham and his two books. Now let's move on to the next author, Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood is a Canadian writer. On the screen, you can see how many books she wrote, what kind of books they were. And you need also to know that she has won numerous awards for her writing. But before she became a full-fledged writer, by the way, she started writing when she was very young. But before she became a real writer, she had different kinds of jobs. One of them was the job of a teacher. The two books that I would like to talk to you about are The Handmaid's Tale and The Testaments. I read the first one many, many years ago, and since then have been recommending it to many people, mainly to women, because the book is about the fate of women. And this fate, I must say, is not the easiest one. The main character of the book, The Handmaid's Tale, June, tells the story of her life. She lives in the totalitarian state Gilead. The freedom of all women in this state is completely restricted. Women are deprived of jobs, property, friends, even of their own names. Jude is now called Offred. The name, her new name, consists of two words, of as a preposition, of, and then Fred, which is the name of the man in whose house she now lives as a handmaid. So this man is called Fred, and her name means belonging to him. It can be interpreted, the name can be interpreted belonging to Fred, of Fred. She is kept in his house as a person who might give birth to a child because his wife is incapable of conceiving a baby. All handmaids in Gilead are assigned to the same task, conceiving and giving birth to babies because of very low fertility rates and low reproduction rates of some elite couples. The Handmaid's Tale has been made into a series. There are several seasons. I managed to watch only the first season. And I can tell you that the film is not very easy. It's quite a challenging kind of film to watch. The book is very serious and challenging, but the film is even worse, I believe, because of many naturalistic scenes which are not very pleasant to see. The second book, The Testaments, is a sequel to the first book. It was written 35 years after the first one was published. And Margaret Atwood herself explains why she decided to write a sequel. The fact is that many readers of The Handmaid's Tale asked her, what happened? What happened? Was Gilead destroyed? How did it fall? And what happened to the main character? That's why the answer to these readers' questions had to be given, and Margaret Atwood came up with a book called The Testaments. It tells the story of 3 young girls and 1 elderly lady who tried to do everything in their power to make this autocratic and theocratic and totalitarian state of Gilead fall. And they managed. So the ending of the book cannot be called exactly very happy, but still we learn that girls succeeded in their endeavor and managed to escape. And the information which they carried with them when they escaped Gilead helped people in the world understand how corrupt and false the state is. This is another book which I would recommend very strongly to girls and women. Well, now the third author, also a woman, Elif Shafak. Elif Shafak is the most widely read female author in Turkey. She is an activist for women's rights, minority rights, and freedom of speech. On the screen, you can see that she writes in 2 languages. You can also read how many books she published and into how many languages her books have been translated. The 2 books that I would like to talk about are The 40 Rules of Love and her most recent book, 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. The 40 Rules of Love is a book within a book. The character by the name of Ella is an American housewife who is tired of her life as a wife and mother because her husband is unfaithful to her and her children don't care very much about her interests. So she decides to find a job for herself and eventually finds it. She becomes a literary agent, which means a person who reads manuscripts, who reads books, so that they can be recommended for publishers then, and eventually they will be published. So she reads a book called Sweet Blasphemy. It is a novel about the lives of a Sufi dervish, Shams of Tabriz, and the poet Rumi. As Ella reads the story of these 2 people, she becomes interested in the personality of the author, in the personality of the man who wrote Sweet Blasphemy. And they begin to exchange emails. She finds the information about him on the website, and first very shyly writes an email to him, but then when he answers, they start corresponding regularly. And as they correspond, as she learns more about the man, she eventually falls in love with him. The title of the book, The 40 Rules of Love, is explained by the fact that Sweet Blasphemy, that is the book within that book, incorporates some of the wisdom of Sufism in the form of different rules. What I like about this book is that the 40 Rules of Love is, how should I call it, a multifaceted book. It tells the story of so many different characters, beginning from the people in an American family, the man who wrote the books with last man whose life was quite tragic. And also there are very many characters in Sweet Blasphemy, and each tells his or her own story. Chapters are short, and each chapter is told by a different person. It's a fascinating kind of reading. I highly recommend this book to everyone. And finally, the most recent book by Elif Shafak, 10 minutes, 38 seconds in this strange world. The novel's title and the first half describe the last moments of consciousness of a woman called Leila after she has been murdered. You can listen to Elif Shafak talking about her book on YouTube. She talks about this book on YouTube, explaining why she got interested in certain scientific studies that show that after the heart has stopped beating, the human brain continues to work, continues to function for some minutes. And probably during these minutes, memories that the person possessed flood this person's consciousness. The book is about love, friendship, tolerance, tenderness, and self-sacrifice. Okay, this is all I wanted to tell you about 3 modern writers: American, Canadian, Turkish-British, and now more about reading. I beg your pardon for giving you some recommendations, but since I was asked to do this presentation, I feel that I have a right to do it. When you decide to read something, you need to read what you are interested in. If you like reading detective stories, you can start with Agatha Christie, go on to Ruth Rendell, P.D. James, and other people. If you like something more philosophical, here is Elif Shafak for you. If your knowledge, interest lies in the field of books that can be called as anti-utopias, you can go to Margaret Atwood. When you decide on the book to choose, you need to consider your level. But here is a very interesting point. You cannot stay all the time at the same level. You need to develop, you need to try and include into your reading list more sophisticated books, which go a little bit higher than your present level. Try both focused and relaxed reading. Try to focus on certain grammatical issues or vocabulary, but also do relaxed reading when your main focus will be on the plot, on the characters, not on the language. Also read as often as you can. I know that teachers are very busy people, but maybe now when we are all in lockdown, you can find more time to read. If you develop the habit of reading 10, 20 pages a day now, it will be then the habit that will be consolidated later on, and you will continue reading in the same at the same pace. By the way, that was a piece of advice given to me by my best university teacher. She said that we need to read at least 20 pages a day. And finally, join a reading club. In our university, we had a reading club for many, many years. First, it was different, well, separate for students and teachers. But now, for several years, we already have meetings of our reading club when students and teachers come together. We read a story or a novel and then spend some time discussing it. If you don't have a reading club, organize it. You can start when there are only 2 or 3 people. Believe me, there is nothing more rewarding than sharing your ideas, sharing your impressions, your feelings after reading a good work of fiction. So if you don't have a reading club, organize it, be the organizer. And here is a very good quote, which I would like to read for you. Reading has been shown to put our brains into a pleasurable trance-like state, similar to meditation. And it brings the same health benefits of deep relaxation and inner calm. Regular readers sleep better, have lower stress levels, higher self-esteem, and lower rates of depression than non-readers. I like this quote very much. I think there are very important things here, things that we all need to remember, but I would like to single out the phrase regular readers, not just reading from time to time. Considering all these benefits that regular reading can do, why not start reading today? Thank you for your attention. Now, if there are questions, I will try to answer them if I can, of course.
Thank you very much, Rozaliya. So please, if you have any questions, could you please write them down in our chat box? And we will ask Rozaliya to answer them.
No questions?
Yeah, just a minute. Yes, now there are some questions here. There is one question, Rozaliya, from Nasirova. Do you, here is, do your team, I guess this is the question about the types of books that you are reading. Do you read ebooks or paper ones?
I very rarely read books from the screen, electronic books. I usually read hard copies, and I have already said why. I like the feeling, the tactile feeling of taking a book into my hand, turning the pages. I believe I'm a tactile person. That's why I prefer hard copies, not electronic versions. Probably also because my eyesight is not very good and it is tiresome to read from the screen.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. The next question is about the drama club that you supervise. Deldore asks you to tell us more about it.
Well, I can speak for hours and hours about our drama club, but probably now we have no time to do that. So I will say just one thing which is somehow connected to reading. I believe that participation in the drama club made students who take part in all our productions appreciate good works of fiction, good works of literature. In our case, they are plays, they read plays. We spend some time reading plays before we actually start learning the lines and thinking about movements and so on and so forth. But actually talking about drama club can be another presentation, another webinar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some more questions. What kind of books can you recommend to students who are interested in science fiction?
Well, we all know the names of Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Simak. I'm afraid I'm not a great reader of science fiction, so I cannot now remember any names of modern writers. but why not try to start with good classical writers like Bradbury, for example?
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. There is another. I should say that it's another question from Deldora. Yeah, coming back to the drama club. The matter is that she's going to open one, I guess herself, and she's asking for some advice from you.
My advice to anybody who is eager and is going to start supervising the drama activities is have patience. Don't expect that people will immediately appreciate all your efforts. Try to find a short play just for the beginning, could be a sketch. And if your students who participate in that sketch, who play their small roles, are enthusiastic enough, next year you will have more participants. But you yourself need to remember that all you need is enthusiasm and patience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Rozaliya. Let me have a look if there is.
Oля, there is another question from Niso. Rozaliya, have you ever thought of writing a book?
Well, thinking is not doing. I believe I don't have much to write about. I'm not a writer, I'm a reader. That's the answer.
Thank you, Rozaliya. Any other questions?
Yes, there are some more questions from Uliana, I guess. What was your first book that hooked you, which you couldn't put down?
Good question, but difficult to answer. I don't remember what was the first book that really hooked me. Probably it was The Gadfly by Voynich, which I read as a student in the lessons of home reading. In my time, there was this aspect of learning English called home reading. And the book by Ethel Lillian Voynich, The Gadfly, which I actually read before in Russian, but when I read it in English with our teacher, really hooked me.
Thank you. We have lots of questions, Rozaliya, so
can we group them somehow and maybe I can answer in writing?
They're all different though.
I see.
Do you recommend to read magazines, for example, The Economist from Akram?
Interesting question, but the topic of today's talk was reading fiction. As far as I know, The Economist doesn't publish any short stories or extracts from novels. If you use the articles published in The Economist for your professional purposes, that's okay, but I don't know whether I can recommend this very specific journal as a source of reading fiction. No, I don't think so.
Okay. What's the book that you are reading now?
I'm going to start reading another of Elif Shafak's book called Flea Palace. I decided to start reading it from next Monday, because now I'm reading a book in Russian. I sometimes do that. I read 2 books in English and then 1 book in Russian. By the way, when I saw the film, The Handmaid's Tale, I was interested in how they translated certain things that were so cleverly put by Margaret Atwood in the book. For example, that name of Fred. And they, into Russian, they translated it as Fredova, belonging to Fred, Fredova. So sometimes it's interesting to read things in Russian as well, or watch films in Russian as well. Anything else?
Yes. From Mukadas, another question. What activities could you recommend to improve the reading skills, especially in the beginning? Well,
you mean activities for your students?
Maybe
for the students. Yes?
It doesn't specify here, but let's go for students.
Well, if you are using a good book, there are lots of different activities that are given by the authors which help to develop reading skills. But this is mainly about intensive reading. As for extensive reading, I would recommend advising your students to choose a book which they would be really interested in, really engaged in reading, and get together and discuss it with them. There are lots of different easy read series, and some of them can be bought in Tashkent in the Macmillan shop. And this is the start for a reading club, by the way. You recommend your students books to read, like as extensive reading, and then you get together and discuss them. This is a wonderful activity, sharing opinions, talking to each other. Sometimes the talk that begins with the book turns to be talk about general life matters, which is fine, which is okay. So my recommendation about activities for students is discussion. Many skills will be developed, not only reading, but also speaking and listening. Anything else?
So, Umida, are there any other questions?
Somebody raised the hand.
Yes, there is another interesting question from Uliana. Have you counted the number of books you have read so far? Because you are amazing at reading books.
No, never entered my mind. Never entered my mind to do that. Why should I do it?
Which fiction books could you recommend, which is related to engineering?
Engineering. I'm afraid I'm not a great specialist. I'm not good at engineering, so at the moment can't think of any. I believe some science fiction authors wrote about things that can be relatively close to engineering. So why not try and look for these authors like Isaac Asimov and Ray Bradbury? You can find certain things that were futuristic in the times when they wrote their books, but have become reality now. Are there any other questions?
Well, people, thank you for this interesting webinar.
Well, I hope I managed to share my passion for reading, and if you can find the books by those authors that I was talking about today and read them, you will also like them, I'm pretty sure. Or you can start with watching films based on their books.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rozaliya, for such an informative and inspiring presentation. I guess it will be very useful, and it is very useful already, and will be very useful for those who will be watching the video recording of this webinar. And I'm very sorry again for the technical problems that we experienced at the very beginning of the webinar. Hope lessons learned, and we will of course think about the possibilities and risks that it might happen again for the next time. As for now, I would like to share with you some more information about just a minute. The webinar that we had last time with Erkin Muhamedov, grammar assessment. So this is a link that you can use to watch it again if you if you need to, or just watch it if you didn't manage to participate the webinar last time. This link will be shared in all groups, preset, ESP, EMI, so among the teachers and teacher educators. Please follow it and enjoy it. Hope you will find it useful too. So as I told you at the very beginning, it is our third webinar, and this is the last webinar in this series of webinars we prepared for you. But it is not the last series of webinars that we have prepared for you. So from the next week already, we are going to start a new series of webinars, and this time it will be on language assessment literacy. The first webinar will be on already at 4 p.m. On Wednesday, on 13th of May. Please get registered. The link will be shared today with you as well through social networks, as well as the Telegram groups. Please follow it, get registered as soon as possible, because the seats are limited. And I hope you will like them as well. You will find them useful. There will be 6 webinars in this series. Please join them. Hope to see you there as well. Are there any questions? I've noted that our chat box is active now too.
Yes, Ola, people ask to share the link to the chat. The link to the previous webinar, I guess.
Yes, we will. Of course, we will do it. We will do it. I can show it again here, but we will do it through our Telegram groups as well. And today, I guess, after the webinar, we will send it to you. So if there are no other questions, then I'd like to thank you all. Thank you, Rosa, for such a wonderful and really inspiring presentation that will, I guess, inspire all of us. Take a book and read at least 20 pages a day to learn more and to be inspired by the heroes of these books. Thank you again to Rozaliya, and thank you to everybody who managed to join us today.